Zac Childs, welcome to Australian Musician.
I'm honored to be here.
Just looking at your bio here, things you were doing and have done. Musician, guitar tech for Brad Paisley, writer for Vintage Guitar Magazine, YouTube presenter with your popular channel Ask Zac with 14,000 subscribers, and director of International and Distributor Sales for Truetone.
Yes, sir.
It's fair to say you have an all-round view of the music industry.
I have the advantage of having seen it from many different points of view, and it's just made it more fun and more relatable. So for others, so I love it.
Of all those things, which comes easier to you?
Oh, I think I would have to say the thing that comes easiest to me is my own channel, because it's just me being myself, and in a way I'm kind of downloading knowledge that I've gathered through the years. So yeah, so my personal YouTube channel, Ask Zac, that's the easiest, because really I don't do a lot of planning for that. I kind of do an outline and then kind of start the camera. There's no editing. It's all it's all stuff that I've researched through the years, and so that's probably the thing that's the easiest.
Yeah.
So
how have you been coping with this 2020 pandemic year?
Well, it's been both a blessing and a curse. Obviously there have been ways in which negatively affected with being able to go out and the normal things. There's ways in which there were at times sales for Truetone were quite a bit lower because during the lockdown. But then on the other side of the coin, I have spent a lot of quality time with my children and my wife, which has been a fabulous thing. I've practiced the guitar more. I have had more time to launch my personal channel, because one of the things, the channel actually started in January of this year, and so and it was because of that I was able to, and it was because of COVID that I had the time to put together a website, get content on it. And I think I did my best to try to take advantage of the situation, in a sense of, oh, I have this time on my hands. What am I going to do with it? I can just sit around and play video games or whatever. But, I decided, well, I have this time available to me. I might as well, use it wisely. And I'm glad I did, because I got the channel going, and then things started opening back up again business-wise with Truetone, and all of a sudden everyone was scrambling for product. Everyone was, because one of the side effects of COVID was it caused a lot of consumerism, and it caused a lot of people sitting at home to order stuff online. And I'm guessing it's the same way in your country.
Yeah. We, I think it was March, the stores had Christmas-like sales for that month.
Right.
March or April, but then we had a bit of an issue with stock. But
yes.
that seems to be becoming alleviated now as well.
Yes. So again, it's kind of going back to your question about COVID. I've tried to deal with it in a safe way, and so one of the things we did was I do an interview show for Truetone called the Truetone Lounge.
Yeah.
And on it, we went to doing interviews like what we're doing now through Zoom or Skype, because we couldn't do in-person ones. So it's all about, I think, any type of situation that comes before you that's a challenge. It's, are you going to take on the challenge and find another way to get it done? Or are you going to mope around and say, when is somebody going to save me?
Yeah. let's go back a way and do a bit of a Zac Childs history lesson.
Yeah.
Your musical flame, who lit that? Who were the guitarists that really got you going?
Okay. You know, the funny thing was is that I started playing the guitar because my mother kind of forced me to. So I mean, she wasn't. It wasn't like, you know, at gunpoint or anything, but it was. You know, it was. I used to sit around and I was obsessed with the Second World War, which seems really bizarre. It seems like a strange thing for an 11 and 12-year-old kid to be obsessed with the. Yeah, and so and I didn't have any friends, and she thought, well, here's another thing that he can do by himself is play the guitar. So she signed me up for this, and I started taking lessons. But to answer your question fully, the probably, I think when I really, you know, it was probably Eric Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan that really kind of lit my fire, because I wanted to play the guitar, but when I saw them play, and you know, also being from Texas, and you know, and being Stevie Ray Vaughan was still alive at this point, and he was kind of a, you know, home state hero, as it were. I was a huge, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, and you know, and he had such a personality, and he had an image, you know, the way he dressed, the way he played, he was, you know, his music, everything, his voice, everything was very unique. So,
Yeah.
you know.
I was amused by your latest Ask Zach video about Rickeys gags.
Yes.
And as a 12-year-old, you saw him and you said it was the most stupid thing you'd ever seen.
Yes.
Explain to people who haven't seen that video what you meant.
Okay. So in the episode, I'm talking about the first time I'm getting to go to the Grand Ole Opry, which, you know, in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm living in Texas at the time. My father was a car dealer. He was a Ford and Nissan dealer, and they were having a new car showing in Nashville. And as part of that, we got to go to the Opry, and I hadn't really started playing the guitar yet, and I definitely was not into country music at all. You know, and so we get to the Opry, and I didn't know what to expect. And all of a sudden, this guy with a big mullet, you know, because Ricky Skaggs had a mullet, you know, it was the mid 1980s. He had a big mullet, and he had a purple Telecaster, and he's coming out, and you know, it's a show, and there's a corn pone kind of hee-haw kind of thing, that, you know, showmanship, and he, you know, yeehaw, I'm Ricky Skaggs, and these are the Skaggettes, you know, this kind of, you know, that I didn't know how to take that kind of country humor at the time, and I just thought it was horrible. And so I didn't really take in how good of a musician and singer he was at that point. And so it took me a couple of years to you know, to understand what a fabulous musician and singer that Ricky Skaggs is, and it was, you know, his own work and his work with Emmylou Harris and the Hot Band and things like that. So,
Yeah. Have you had many fanboy moments along the way in Nashville?
I have. I like that question. There have been times where I have been completely dumbstruck, and I've met a lot of my heroes, and I've you know, through vintage guitar, I've interviewed a lot of great players, and I think the most dumbstruck I've ever been was meeting Buck Owens. And I was working for Brad Paisley at the time, and we were backstage at Buck Owens's club. It's called the Crystal Palace, and it's in Bakersfield, California. And we were backstage, and I'd been working for Brad for a couple of months at this point, and all of a sudden, here's Buck Owens. Now, I had watched Buck Owens, you know, growing up on Hee Haw. You know, I watched him every week. And here's this guy that it's like from my childhood. All of a sudden, here's this guy, and he seemed bigger than life. And I was wearing all black, and I was teching and I was playing. So I was playing with Brad also on that show. And I came up to Buck and I was completely dumbstruck, and Brad Paisley introduces me to Buck Owens, and I can't say anything. I'm just standing there with my mouth hanging open. And Brad, trying to save the moment because he's a good guy and he's also a friend, he said, well, of course, as you can tell, Zac is a big fan of the Man in Black. And then Buck says, well, you're not going to find a bigger, fan of the Man in Black than the Buck Owens. Luckily it was kind of, the moment was saved. But yes, there was that was a pretty interesting moment. And then I actually got to play with Buck Owens, and that was big. Another kind of dumbstruck fanboy was going to William Shatner's house to watch Monday Night Football.
Okay.
So this was again with Brad Paisley, because Brad really, because of his own, kind of musical fame, and also because his wife being an actress, his wife is Kimberly Williams, who was in the Father of the Bride film with Steve Martin and Diane Keaton and other films. And so there was kind of that collision of Nashville and Hollywood with Brad and his wife. And so at one point, Brad called me up and he said, I need you to fly to LA with my 1968 Pink Paisley Telecaster because I want to have it in a video that we're shooting. And I said, sure, no problem. So I went and got the guitar, flew to LA, and then, Brad gets a phone call from William Shatner's, assistant saying, hey, would you like to come to William Shatner's house to watch Monday Night Football with him? And it's like, okay. And he said, well, can I bring a friend? And she got permission. So yes, I went and watched Monday Night Football at William Shatner's house, and Ben Stiller was there also, as was, there was the Scott Hamilton, the U.S. Olympic skater. He was there, and it was very strange. It was interesting. There was no Star Trek stuff anywhere.
Yeah.
There was a he's Jewish, so there was my vocabulary is what is the candles, is that the menorah? Okay. Anyway, he had the can, and he had also had he's very much into paintball, and he had a gold-plated paintball gun out, but otherwise there was nothing Star Trek at all, which I wouldn't have expected there really to have been Star Trek stuff at William Shatner's house. But anyway, that was very interesting, and he was very nice.
Yeah.
So those are some fanboy moments.
William Shatner never ceases to amaze me. He shows up in the most bizarre film clips and situations. He's incredible.
Yeah, I think the thing that was interesting about meeting him was you find out how guarded these people have to be when they're in public. And so when you're around them in public, they're very guarded, and they have a wall up because they know people are going to recognize them and want to come up to them and want to, and some of them handle it better than others. But then to be with, Shatner at his own home, well, of course he's the kindest, nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. But when he was out in public, he was, you could tell he had a wall up that was kind of like, don't mess with me. Yeah. So, yeah.
What's the short story of how you became Brad Paisley's guitar tech?
Sure. We went to college together. We went to university, and we were friends, and we played together in bands, and he kind of kept it a secret that he wanted to be an artist. And he portrayed himself only as a guitar player. And then he would kind of slowly let it out of the bag that he was writing songs. And in fact, in college, at university, he had written a number of his hits, like I'm gonna Miss Her, the Fishing Song, and some other tunes he had actually written at university. So that's how we met, and we knew each other. And then I started playing with him as an artist, but before he was signed, and he started getting a lot of attention because he's a great guitar player, and he's a great, songwriter, and he's a solid singer. And he got signed to a publishing deal, which means he had a songwriting deal this is in 1995, 1996. And then not long after that, he, was able to get a artist deal with Arista, and he and I kind of drifted apart at that point. And because he was making a record, and I was trying to make it in Nashville, playing on demos, and playing bar gigs and stuff like that. And we kind of drifted apart, and I ended up moving to France. And so I lived in Paris for a year. And while I was living in Paris, his first album came out and he started having hits. And I came back to the States, and I actually moved back to Texas, and had kind of gotten completely away from the music industry. And I was playing gigs on the weekend in Houston, Texas. And all of a sudden I came home from work one day, and there was a message on my phone. Well, this is the old days. This was, again, over 20 years ago, when you still had phone machines, and you still would check your messages on your answering machine. And it was from Brad. And so I called him back, and he had enough hits that he could afford to hire his first guitar tech, because before that, people in the band or the bus driver or someone else was having to try to help him out with his gear. And he finally had enough hits and was making enough money that he could afford to have his first guitar tech. And he said, I know this is not playing, because I'd never been a guitar tech before. He said, he said, I know you're not going to be able to play guitar like you probably would like to. Said, but this is a way in which, because what I want to sound like, and how a guitar should play, all these things. Maybe you don't know all the technical stuff, but you can learn that. And so he, one, because he trusted me and we were friends, and two, he knew that I would learn the skills that I needed to learn. And so basically going to work for him was a whole lot of making phone calls. So, I would have to call Dr. Z, who was making his guitar amps, and learn how to repair something. I would have to call Bill Crook, who was making his guitars, and have him explain to me how to wire something up inside a guitar. Or call Robert Keeley or Voodoo Labs, or all these different companies. I depended on them for help because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was doing all this on the job, training. And my stock answer was, when Brad would ask me to do something, I would say, I don't know how to do that yet, but I will figure it out. And I always, I always pulled through on that. So I never, I never got axed. So.
Currently you're working with Truetone.
Yes.
I can't imagine that you're the kind of guy that would work for just anyone for the sake of it. What was it about Bob Wiles and Truetone that made you want to work for them?
Bob Wiles is a man of integrity, and he runs a family type organization, even though we're not his blood relatives, but he treats us well. He also empowers us to help the customer. So we will bend over backwards to keep somebody as a customer. So if someone is having a problem with something, even though it's out of warranty, we have kind of a certain dollar amount that's like, no matter what, we can just take care of them. And it's only when you get, some, I think it was like $500 or $1,000 that, until you get up to that point, then there'd have to be more discussion, or if perhaps maybe there's actually been abuse, by the customer. But I love the fact that he has empowered us to help the customer, where you don't have to, ask, well, I'm going to have to talk to, the owner of the company or anything like that. So I can help out our distributors or individual customers. And also I use the products. I love the power supplies that we make, and I'll add this, Bob is not, stuck in the mud. If something's not working, he's willing to try other things. it's kind of like our business used to be more based on pedal sales. It used, and the power supplies were a small part of it. And then as the years went on, it's become more and more dependent on the power supply sales. And with that, he has produced more models of power supplies, including, like we have this Pro line that are, brick type power supplies that were introduced about 5 years ago. And they've been a huge seller for us. And I think it's the fact that he stands behind us, he treats us well. I love the fact that, I use the products and my friends use the products, and pros are using our stuff. And so, that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the One Spot, what are the power supply issues that product has addressed the best?
Well, the One Spot was the first digital switching power supply, for guitar pedals. So the power supplies that were being made before that could only produce about 200 milliamps, which is about enough. Which that isn't even enough power for a single Strymon pedal. That'll power like a handful of overdrives and maybe a digital delay and a chorus. But so one, you have the fact that he introduced a power supply that instead of having 200 milliamps, it had 1700 milliamps. It had a lot more power, and you could buy it as a combo pack with a daisy chain, which that was completely unheard of at the time. Boss sold this plastic pedal board called the BCB6 that was the only way you could get a daisy chain, was it came with this plastic pedal board that they introduced in the 80s. And so this whole concept of having a power supply and a daisy chain to power a number of pedals was a new thing, and to make it where it was kind of easy to find. And so you have that aspect. So that was revolutionary. Then you have, when he came out with the Pro series, those were the first, brick isolated type power supplies that are offering different voltages that was using this new technology. Because again, the old technology is inefficient, and it actually gives off a lot of heat, and it doesn't meet today's kind of green, earth friendly, standards. So, the old style transformers are country specific. So, and they're heavy because it has a big transformer, has a big coil of wire. And, you probably, you remember them from the past because they were heavy. They'd plug into the wall and they'd get warm. And they kind of got displaced, probably around 20 years ago with, the first thing that used them were like cell phone chargers. So, Bob saw that, 20 plus years ago and went with that technology in the music world, and really made a name for himself, with that. And then with the brick type power supplies, because again, this was the first time this digital technology was being used in this aspect. And because of that, it had so much more power than what was the industry standard at that point.
Truetone makes some great pedals, the Jekyll and Hyde, Route 66, the H2O, and plenty of others. What are the critical factors which make, say, one overdrive pedal better than another?
Wow. I'll say this, in the 1980s, there weren't that many, overdrives available. And, you really, in some ways, it was kind of difficult to find good sounding overdrives. Now, since the 90s and the birth of, the boutique movement with pedals, you have a lot of, great, options. I think what Truetone, or formerly Visual Sound, did was started coupling circuits together, which had never been done before, and also tweaking them because again, Bob was really part of that early, boutique movement, because the company, was started in 1995. And it was a focus on overdrives maybe that were a little smoother and less bright, and and just more pleasing to our own sounds. I don't know that I've answered your question.
Near enough.
I feel but I think as overdrive is something that's very subjective, and that's why there's so many different flavors of overdrive out there, and it's the player has to find the thing that suits them well. But the overdrives that we've produced through the years have been the things that we like and that we hear, and I'll admit that a lot of we're getting a lot of feedback from Nashville based players, and that's why we had circuits that were based loosely on the tube screamer and based loosely on like the Noble's ODR1, which is those are popular circuits in Nashville and outside of Nashville. So
yeah, well, what's the biggest mistake guitarists make when putting together their pedal boards?
Oh golly, the biggest mistake is having too much stuff that they don't know well. It's important that you know your rig well, that you know the pedals that you have well. And I see guitarists that have so much stuff on their pedal board, and there's nothing wrong with having a big pedal board, but you need to know everything on it well. I see guitarists that instead of playing the gig or playing the rehearsal properly, because rehearsal is about getting to everyone's supposed to know their stuff, and then you're figuring out how to put it together. I see guitar players in rehearsals that spend way too much time bending over and twiddling knobs during a rehearsal instead of playing and interacting and doing those things. And I know that there's a certain amount of that has to be done, but I see a lot of guitarists that I feel are messing with their gear instead of being musical. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see, is guitar players being focused completely on themselves and their gear instead of being focused on the artist and the band and being part of the band and being musical.
Yeah. Truetone gear is distributed in Australia by EGM Distribution,
Yes.
Marcello Grassi.
Yes.
How long have you been dealing with those guys, and have you ever been to Australia?
Well, I have not been to Australia, and I really want to. I love to travel, and last year I spent 6 weeks in Europe, and I want to once all this COVID mess is over, I want to go to Australia and maybe also hit some part of Asia also. But that's high on my list is going to Australia. Two, I've been working with Marcello and EGM for 13 years. Now they've been with the company longer than that, but that's, I just hit my 13-year anniversary working for the company. And I remember going to my first NAMM show in Anaheim, California, and meeting Marcello. And he's a fantastic guy. And we hit it off right away because one, Marcello is a great guy. Two, he's into vintage stuff and he has a great sense of humor. And so, I write for Vintage Guitar Magazine. And so, yeah, Bob would always have to split us up at the NAMM show, because I would just want to, sit and yammer on with Marcello about, about guitars and, what he's up to. But, yes, Marcello is a dear friend, and I love getting to work with him, and they're a great distributor for us. And they've when we came out with the Pro line, he really took it on and has done amazing things with it, and we're very grateful for Marcello and EGM and the wonderful work they do with us in Australia. They're wonderful.
So what's the holy grail of products? What hasn't been invented that needs to be invented?
Oh my goodness. Um, the holy grail of products that hasn't been invented yet. Oh, you know, a guitar that the nut and the frets do not wear down on at all, and it doesn't go out of tune. I know I've given you a funny answer, but recently I've just had a lot of trouble. I have a bunch of, I don't have a ton of vintage guitars, but it's funny when you have old guitars lying around. It just seems like they always need work, and it seems like you're always paying for guitars to be refretted and nut work and setting them up and things like that. So I guess that's kind of a funny personal response. But as far as a real product, um, I think. It's more and more, I think, as we're going to more and more digital and we're going away from analog technology, I think continuing to have products that have capabilities but yet have good user interfaces. So I think these products that emulate amplifiers well and also emulate different effects well, these kind of multi-effect boxes, I think as they're able to continue to make them feel better, I still prefer an old, I have a 1965 Deluxe Reverb and a 1967 Telecaster and a couple, stomp boxes. And that's what I like to use. But, we're moving more and more away from that. And also we're running into these situations to where you have gigs where you're not even allowed to use an amplifier. So I think things, the person that is able to make better and better sounding emulations that feel good, and I think that's part of it, is like they're getting the sound more and more, but the emulation of the feel and the interaction between the guitar and the amp, I think that's something that's missing. So I've given you two hopefully not overly esoteric responses concerning products that need to be invented. So yeah, there you have it.
So what's coming up for Truetone and for yourself over the next few months and into next year?
So for Truetone, we've been struggling to keep up with demand, and that's been that's kind of it's a good problem to have, but it's something that's pushed back the release of new products. So we've been working on new versions of the One Spot Pro line, but that's been pushed back because we can't keep up with demand right now, and we're just now kind of catching up on that. So that's the next thing for Truetone. And then also, hopefully at some point, I'll get back to doing in-person interviews, because I love doing the Zoom interviews, like this, but I do miss, interviewing people in person, in our at our offices, where we call it the Truetone Lounge, and we sit down with players, and that's just a lot of fun. So I'm hoping to get back to that. Then as far as my my personal Ask Zac show, I'm just kind of building up an audience and trying to trying to keep improving what I do. I'm doing more planning and kind of blueprinting before I do a show. I'm still using very simple technology. I'm just using 2 cell phones. I'm using 2 iPhones to record my show. I do one for video and one is attached to a lapel mic, and I do that. And so at some point I'm going to try to ratchet that up. But yeah, those are kind of plans. And I think it's right now the hardest thing is trying to be safe and trying to respect others, and also move forward, because it's like, when are we going to be able to play shows again? When am I going to be able to interview people again? When am I going to be able to play shows again? So but I don't want to, I don't want anyone to get hurt. I don't want anyone to get sick. So, it's just, I think there's that that kind of overlay of tension that's always there because of COVID. And, and yeah, I think it's always there, and we're learning how to best deal with it, and, wear a mask and, be safe.
Yeah. Well, Zac Childs, it's been great to catch up, and hopefully we will catch up in person one day. And
Yes.
thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm again so honored that you would have me on your show, and yeah, I love it, and I had a chance to check out some of your interviews. You do a great job. Of course, I love interviews, and I love interviewers that do good work. So I'm honored to have been part of the show. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right.